of Crossy's Corner. I'm Martin Cross, and with me today is the one and only George Nash. Hi, George.
Hi, Crossy. It is really a privilege to spend some
Oh,
time talking to you. It really is.
well,
Not worthy.
yeah. I'm loving the fact that we're able to do this, and I'm even more pleased that it's gone live on YouTube. So that's a
Okay, we're
relief.
up and running.
We're up and running. Yeah. So we were just talking before we went on air about the head of the Charles, and neither of us were there, but I guess we both saw the results.
Yeah, I mean, I'm dyed in the wool Cambridge, so from that point of view, it's just kind of historic, spectacular. Every superlative you can think of. It's just really cool to see. I think they won in 2004, so it's kind of 20 years since they've had a kind of decent result. So it's pretty exciting. It's pretty exciting for the season ahead to have, two kind of world leading crews probably come boat race day going kind of toe to toe.
Yeah.
That's
Um,
cool.
I've got a. I've got a, one thing that just occurred is how often do you get your Olympic medals out, your gold and your bronze? I mean, or how often have they stayed wherever you keep them?
Well, my buddy, his dad retrained as a carpenter number of years ago, and he made me this like cabinet. So they kind of hang on the wall in this amazing
Oh, wow.
um, wooden kind of glass cabinet. But right now they're in Cambridge. So the guys at St Catherine's College are putting together a kind of Paris Olympics or a kind of Olympic themed exhibition, and they've kind of dug out all of their Olympic alumni kind of stories. So that's where they are right now.
Now, I know your boy's 3 years old. Have you showed him the medal yet, or is that something that's yet to come?
No, that's yet to come. Yeah, I think he's not quite. Yeah, he's a little bit lethal. And I don't, I'm not quite sure he kind of fully gets it yet, but we're definitely trying to kind of, keep him as active as we can. I took him swimming this morning, so giving him a
Oh, wicked.
good run around.
So we're going to get into the whole boat race stuff, Rio 2. I kind of want to start really, and under 23 stuff, we'll cover all that, but I kind of want to start with 2012 because I don't know if you see that as the most remarkable result of your career, but I was kind of looking back and thinking, I looked at Lucerne that year. I think you finished fifth, although I know it was fairly close. And I'm like, how did they win a bronze medal?
Yeah, yeah, that's what we thought a little bit. Well, we that season was just such a kind of gamble for me on all fronts. I kind of took a year out from Cambridge halfway through my degree, just to speculatively try to make the Olympic team because it was in London. It was once in a lifetime, and I had this break in 2011 where, for whatever reason, Stan and I came together in the pair. And we had this fantastic result at trials, and then we went on to win the under 23s, and that really set me up to kind of get shot into the bottom end, basically, of the senior team. And then once you get your foot in the door, you can kind of build your build your kind of case, I guess, to get selected. And yeah, Will Satch was a little bit more established than me in the 2012 season. He'd been kind of in that senior team environment for a little bit longer, and I think we rode the pair in November or something of that year,
Yeah.
and we had really natural like chemistry. We thought about rowing very similarly, and we kind of delivered this. We delivered the kind of power phase very, very similarly. And I remember it like halfway through that session, we were paddling around. It was like 158 or something, and we were just whipping along, like just going
Yeah.
for it, trying to overtake everyone on the lake. And that's kind of what we were like, the most annoying crew. And I remember him turning around and being like, mate, like, it would be a dream to go to the Olympics in this boat. And I was like, at the time, I was like, whoa, that means a lot.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
I was also like, my ambition at that time was like, I really want to try and make the eight. because I think the eight's probably going to win. It had all this talent in it, and the team that year, the team was just stacked. And in the end, I didn't quite make the eight, and it just so happened that neither did Will. We were very close, but we just didn't quite get there on the seat racing.
Who got in
And
ahead of you?
Tom Ransley. Tom Ransley got in. Yeah.
T-Man.
But I
Oh.
challenged it. I was young and bullish and kind of a little bit arrogant. I was like, Jürgen, I want to talk to you about this. Like, and he kind of diffused me. He said, George, like, see it as an opportunity. You're probably gonna put you in the pair with Will. And I did, and it was awesome. From kind of minute one, I think the first session was whatever it was on a Monday, like 4 by 2K UT1 or whatever, and we were just flat out like 3%. It's just so much aggression, so much passion, and it was just a wonderful year. But we weren't. Our goal was at the start of the project was to make the final,
Yeah.
and that looked like it was doable from the early season races. We were it was looking like we were about the same speed as like the Greek pair. There was a German pair that was quite good, and we were not really in the same league as like the Canadian pair or the Kiwi pair, obviously, who were just, really untouchable at that time. They were really at the top of their game, and we didn't really think that, they were, that we weren't really interested in them, sort of thing. We were kind of thinking about the Greeks and the Germans, and we kind of got a little bit. I think Will got a bit of an injury, and we had this kind of very difficult build up. And then when we got to Dorney, we were very focused on this like kind of slightly lower rate, long rhythm that didn't really work for us. We were kind of checking the boat quite a lot at like rate
Who was
35.
coaching you then?
Christian Felker was coaching us, and he was
Okay,
great
yeah.
at kind of managing. He was a very calm presence and cool guy. But he was very much, talking about the kind of British, distance per stroke thing, and that's great. But for some reason, we were just checking the boat at 35. It just wasn't. We weren't able to generate boat speed. But if we popped it up to like 38, 39, suddenly the boat would just fly. It just wouldn't check.
Oh.
So we kind of figured that out at Dorney with a few 500-meter pieces or whatever in the lead up. And we were like, all right, well, let's just give that a go. And I remember on the day before the heat, we saw the Greeks on telly walking around in the opening ceremony, and we were like, right, you guys, you're done.
Yeah.
And then that first race, that middle K, we were just super aggressive, and we put this time down that was a pretty decent benchmark for a British pair. We did 6:16, which now is, a little bit average, but at that time was approaching. World record speed was 6:14. On that day, actually, obviously moved to 6:08. But
Yeah.
that even then, the stopwatch kind of doesn't really lie, and we kind of earned a little bit of respect from the team, from the guys in the team. They're like, oh god, yeah, no, that was pretty good, And then in the semi-final, we beat the French guys, pretty handily. It was pretty comfortable, and suddenly we'd basically beaten everyone in the group except for the Canadians and the Kiwis. And the Canadians looked like they were having kind of quite a difficult regatta. So we were sort of thinking, right, well, we're on here for a silver. We should probably win a silver on finals day. And we had 3 days between the semi and the final. And suddenly the pressure just went, and it suddenly felt like facing like a barbarian horde. Like the nerves. I couldn't sleep for like 3 days, not a wink. And I couldn't control it, and I could feel it happening, and I tried to rationalize it, and there was just nothing I could do about it. And so come finals day, I was like a ghost. I was like, couldn't eat, couldn't like do anything. And halfway through the race, when we went off a little bit soft, I guess probably because of the pressure. But in a pair, it kind of doesn't really matter because it's quite a long race. You can kind of change the game a little bit halfway through. And at that time, in the British, my generation of juniors were brought up on the kind of French pair story of 2000, where they just
Yeah,
changed the
yeah.
game halfway. So we were kind of had a lot of belief in that kind of strategy. And yeah, I remember there was an Australian middle distance runner. I can't remember his name for the life of me, but he wrote a book about making a choice, basically, halfway through your race in a kind of 3,000 or 5,000 meter race, or even a 1,500. You make a choice, like, okay, I'm gonna go into the darkness and take the risk, and it might pay off or it might not. And at 500 gone in 2012, I kind of had that story for some reason just popped into my subconscious, and I was like, well, I can hear the crowds. This day
Yeah.
isn't coming again. I'm going. I don't care what Will's doing. I'm going to give it a go. Yeah, and I couldn't feel pain because the nerves were just so intense and the adrenaline was so high that I just couldn't feel any pain in my legs. So I just kept upping power, upping pressure, just turning the screw, turning the screw. And there's no feedback coming from my legs. I was like, well, it's not probably isn't hard enough because it should really burn at this time,
Yeah.
750, 1250 in. Just kept upping it, kind of came back, kept coming back on the French. I think we took the lead a little bit, maybe with 500 to go. And then suddenly Will just like came in with this sprint at the time where I was just coming out. My body just started shutting down. I didn't know what was going on. It was so unconscious. I didn't have any lactic acid that I could feel. And I just started going across lanes. And luckily the Kiwis were so far ahead that didn't really matter. And the French just pipped us. And the kind of feeling when we crossed the line was, for me, it was one of like apology. I think I apologized to Will. I was like, man, I'm sorry about that.
Oh,
It felt like a
whoa.
bit of an underperformance. Despite, in the context of the season and in the context of the year, it was just epic. It was an amazing result. And that feeling of disappointment kind of dissipated quite quickly. And you're on the podium and the crowds
Yeah.
were just crazy. And it was just a really magic day. And Will and I, the whole season had been just having so much fun. It was just such a natural pair, on and off the water. We kind of had a kind of similar sense of humor, similar approach to training and racing, and it was a real, um, it was just a real privilege. The whole thing was just amazing.
So
But
who's your?
in
Go
terms of
on.
the
Yeah.
rowing, sorry, Crossy.
No, go on.
In terms of the performance, like going forward, for me, it kind of galvanized the next 4 years because I was like, well, kind of underperformed there. There are a few things that were quite wrong. I really want to try to get control of them, for the next time that
Mm.
the pressure comes. I want to try to be a little bit more in control of my response. And that was, I guess, a little bit of a challenge.
So who? I was thinking there, just out of interest, because I always had you and Stan as like this, but I'm thinking, is his soulmate international rowing buddy really Will Satch?
Well, well, I'm a little bit caught in the middle, like
I know.
Stan,
Yeah.
Stan was just this phenomenal and is this just phenomenal dude, just faultless dude, and he was so talented in at that time, 2011, 2012. His pairs were just super fast, and there were quite a few bowsiders around at the time that if they had that ticket, that would have given them the step that I had, and I felt very lucky at the time, to be honest, to be on that rocket kind of thing. But we did gel quite well, and we did get quite fast through that 2011 season towards under 23s. We did do some
Yeah.
quite fast stuff, and relative to the rest of the senior guys, we were quite good. As we had a reasonable result at trials. I think we came fourth, and we
You
were
were in the
pretty
final at
close.
Lucerne, weren't you, that year?
That year, I think Lucerne was a bit of a low spot. It didn't feel great there. I think we
Yeah.
won the B final. I think
Oh,
we won the
right.
B
Sorry.
final, but we
Yeah.
got
Okay.
dusted by the Kiwis, and the Canadians were hot that regatta. They nearly beat
Yeah.
the Kiwis, I think. Um, so yeah, but yeah, with Will we had a kind of I guess a different kind of chemistry really, but both equally kind of fortunate for me, I guess.
Yeah. Well, how come they put you at 7? Because presumably you were back at Cambridge in 2013, but you ended up at 7 in the GB8.
Yeah, well, I guess when I jumped back in, I I dropped into the bow seat. I think I was in for Ollie Cook, and the British Eight had had a kind of strange season. They were kind of a little bit up and down,
Yeah.
and at that time they were a little bit down. They were very close to losing to the Polish, I think, at one of the World Cup regattas.
Oh, the Poles.
So they were kind of, Jurgen was kind of he was kind of experimenting a little bit with the eight, and I think he wanted to, for a few reasons, he wanted to break up Pete and Andy. I think mostly to transfer their kind of knowledge and experience to the whole crew, to all the new guys. And so he kind of gave me the shot at 7. I think maybe I jumped in and I was in the second 8 in the 7 seat or something, and
Yeah.
we did a training piece and we were kind of relatively close, whatever. But I didn't really feel like I was a natural 7 man. I felt like, to me, it felt very heavy in the 7 seat and difficult and laboured. And it took me a while, a little bit, how, in Boys of the Boat, how Daniel
Yeah.
James Brown writes about Joe Rance in the 7 seat. He's trying to do too much a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And the coach tells him, look, Joe, just like temper it off a little bit and feel what everyone else is doing around you, and then kind of chime into that. And I kind of learned a little bit of that season, I think, a bit more. But that we just had like, initially I was sitting between like Hodgie and Gregors, and we just had so many fantastic rowers to kind of feed off. It was just awesome, and
Yeah.
and we did some cool stuff in training that year. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, I mean, so the Germans won the Olympics, obviously, and broke, well, most of the British hearts, I guess, with that bronze medal. And then you beat them in Chengdu, although it was a different 8.
Yeah, the Germans for sure were the kind of dominant force and the guys to beat. But there were also, that season there was an American 8 that was really going, that won Lucerne under Luke McGee. They were a kind of
Oh,
reformed
yeah.
outfit. There was loads of
Yeah.
talent in that 8. And American college rowing at that time was rapid. There was a Washington 8 that was really hot. So like American rowing was kind of really on the up. So we kind of, there were a few threats. And we
Yeah.
came fourth at Lucerne. We were 4 seconds off the American guys. And one of the interesting things about that year was the response to that from the experienced guys in the crew was basically the leadership that Jurgen, I think, was trying to transfer. They were just so like clinical and cool and confident. They were like, yeah, don't worry about it. Like 4 seconds is nothing. And I was like, 4 seconds is nothing. It's quite a lot. It's a big old margin to make up. We've got like 8 weeks. And they're like, don't worry. They're like step by step. Let's build this up. Get up to altitude. We'll trust in Jurgen. We've been there before. We've lost in Lucerne numerous times and come out on top. Have faith. And the way that, it's difficult to explain really, but the way they kind of communicate, the way they kind of interacted with us was not, wasn't like patronizing or, because they were really, at that time there were big units there were big names in the
Yeah.
sport, double Olympic champions, and you kind of, when that they could have been a little bit aloof and a little bit kind of disgruntled about
Yeah.
being put with all these like kind of nutters like me and Will, but they weren't. They were really just awesome. It was just a fantastic time, and it was just a monstrous transfer of confidence, I think. After we came out on top there, for me it was like, right, I'm in. I get it. Like, this is how you do it, kind of thing. This is how you win. And yeah, it was just huge. And I think it was interesting that was a little bit what Jurgen kind of intended. That's the result. The result we wanted from that year wasn't really about medals. It was about kind
Yeah.
of transferring knowledge.
That's really interesting. So that knowledge transfer, what happened to you to make a difference? Because in 2014, you were in the top boat, the four. I guess I don't know. I can't remember if the eight and the four were equal then, but I think the four was the top boat, wasn't it? And you made the top boat
Yeah.
in the three seat. So what happened there?
Yeah, well, I think that season we mixed the pairs up quite a lot. So and we I rode the season with Hodgie, Mo was with Gregors, I think Pete was with Will, and I think Pete and Will didn't gel so well, and Hodgie and I and Mo and Gregors were just trading, we're just taking chunks out of each other every weekend, and Mo and Gregors ended up on top on the day of the final trials, but the two pairs were like 10 seconds clear of third or something. So there was a really a natural four formed in kind of April of that year, and then and Stan was at Oxford, so he was kind of out of the picture until a little bit later in the season. Um, so that's how the four kind of got going, and it really that year just really clicked, and it was super natural and easy, and we had really good like top speed, so we could kind of come out and do. I think we did like a 116 or 115 or something, 500 meters. We had like piping hot top speed, but we weren't actually over the 2K. That we were still pretty good, but we weren't like,
Do you,
there were.
do you remember what you did in the Viz?
I think it was like in the in the 540s. I can't remember what the
Yeah.
conditions were or whatever, but I remember Jurgen in a Viz that year. We were doing 500-meter pieces, and he was like, "Okay, this is a little bit faster than the Red Grave 4. It's quite good." As a real like boost.
Yeah.
But then we were a little bit disappointed on the day of the Worlds because we had this nice tailwind. We were a little bit disappointed not to beat that world record, and we're quite far off it. I think we were 540 flat. And I think the world record was 537. So
Yeah.
for
That
us,
day.
we thought we were kind of.
Yeah.
Sometimes it felt like we should have been a world record crew, but we weren't quite. But nonetheless, it was awesome. The crew really gelled well, and was part of that. I think me and Mo benefited a lot from spending a lot of time with Hodgie and Gregors, and feeding off of their confidence a little bit.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
can't recall why the four wasn't a thing in 2015 and he went back to the eight as the first boat.
I think Jurgen was a little bit nervous about qualification, and Hodgie got glandular fever.
Oh, yeah.
Hodgie got glandular fever in sort of October or something of 2015, and he was out for the whole season. So Jurgen thought that, Stan was at Oxford for pretty much the whole year, and I think he thought that he didn't want to. He thought that he could bring an eight together and definitely qualify the eight, the four, and the pair kind of thing. So it was a kind of strategy piece about Olympic qualification more than anything else.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But that year was really interesting because we didn't have our two. We didn't have Hodgie, who was a real talisman. So it was real. The responsibility then was kind of transferred over. It's right. Okay, well now you lot have all got to prove yourselves, properly, because you don't have Hodgie to pull you along, which again was another kind of boost because you proved, I guess, another kind of confidence builder. It's like, okay, well, we can win without our kind of our best guy, I guess, and that builds up your confidence again in time for the Olympic sort of assault.
That race between you and the Germans in Aiguebelette at the Worlds was epic.
Yeah, it was tight. It was really tight. We were pretty good in training that eight. We were always kind of top of the kind of percentage charts, and I kind of lived and died by the percentage charts. I kind of loved that kind of inter-boat competition. I really did, and I always felt like I got a lot out of myself on those kind of team time trials. But then in the actual racing, if we were kind of ahead, for me that's kind of good enough, you know. And I think there's a real mix of mindsets, I think, on the day. I mean, we had a pretty good race, but to me, it didn't feel like it was the best effort that we could have given. And I think we got up by 5 seats or whatever, and it kind of felt like, okay, well, the job's done. But, you know, it wasn't. And the Germans had a couple of guys in there who were just epic sprinters. So you had to have.
Who like Adamski, was it? Or was he
No, he
he was
was
in
the big guy,
2012, wasn't he?
6 man, I think he was, and 5 man, Felix Drohotta,
Felix Drahotti, yeah.
and
He was a big unit.
he was a big unit, and he could really sprint, but he could
Was it
also, I think, at
Anton?
Henley that year,
Yeah.
and Anton Brown was the other guy.
Braun,
He was
yeah,
also a big
yeah.
sprinter, and when they were in the pair, they okay, for some races they used to be able to sprint through me and Will, and at Henley, they didn't have those kind of 2,000 meter markers to really guide them down the course. So we were able to kind of crack them halfway through the race and put kind of 3 lengths into them. But on a 2K track, we were never really able to do that. And it was kind of dangerous having that Henley result because we were like, right, you know, we've got 3 lengths from these guys, you know, it's not going to be a problem. And, you know, they're masters. They were just masters of that 2,000 meter format, the Germans were. So I think there was a little bit of complacency in there from our side, to be honest. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, they were also just a strong outfit, and Eights Racing is just always close. Even when you feel like you've got margin, you sort of never do. And it was kind of interesting that, you know, following the British Eight in the last for the last 3 years, they're really a spectacular outfit. You know, they're for sure the best eight, in my opinion, the best eight ever to row. But it was interesting
Really?
that. Oh yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think for sure. Yeah, I think they were physically so strong. You know, some of the scores that you heard about so strong, and the pattern and the run on that boat was, to me, was sort of incomparable. For sure as a British eight, but I think I've never seen any other eight like that one. But it was interesting even that, and they were putting like the margins that they were able to put on other crews were really, you know, kind of alarming at that level. But even then, come the day, you know, on the Olympic final day, you know, it tightens up like crazy, and their margin was still great. But it's funny that that's often how it goes. Yeah.
That's really interesting. I remember before the Rio Olympics, there was a thing at Molesey and a dinner, and I kind of said, you know, I think I ran through the 4 because I said, you know, Stan, you, Gregors, and Mo. You know, what if you were in that 4? And you said, I'd bite your hand off.
Did I? Yeah. 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 Well, I would have
Because
done.
we didn't know. Yeah, we didn't know about Hodgie then. But what's the story of that 4 coming together?
Well, I think probably the truth of it was that was the 4 that Jurgen kind of wanted to put together at the start of the season. He was quite kind of, the way that he kind of selected crews was kind of interesting. You know, it wasn't always about, you know, this guy wins the pairs matrix by half a second, so he gets the seat kind of thing. He'd kind of made up his mind at the start of the season, I think, based on the previous 3 years of racing. And I think he wanted a kind of stable 4 to kind of just get it done while he could focus on the 8 a little bit, because I think he knew that the 8 project was going to be, you know, challenging, mostly because the kind of percentage times coming out of the 8s event were just higher. You know, you had to be a higher percentage of gold medal time to win the 8 at that time, and the Australian 4, you know, wasn't yet on the scene, so the 4s event was perceived to be a little bit more of a reliable win. So he just wanted a kind of group of reliable guys to just get it done. That was my perception of it. And he kind of said at the beginning of the year, he kind of said to me, "Look, I want to put you in the 4. don't make any mistakes. Put solid results in at trials. Put solid results in on the ergo, and you'll be in. Basically, that's what you've got to do. And I was like, okay, fine. I can do that.
Wow.
And so
What
I
were,
think
what were you
that's kind of
pulling
how
on
he
the
ran
erg then?
things.
What were you pulling on the erg then?
It was kind of middle of the pack. That year I did 5:48, which was a PB.
Mm.
But I did, I think, 5:51 in 2012, and then didn't really get close to that for the following couple of years. And then in the 2016 year, moved on a bit. But it was interesting how Jurgen ran it. He kind of, in the post-Olympic year, the total kind of mileage would be a little bit lower, and then he kind of ramp it up by like between 5 and 10% every year. And you get just fitter, and you get a little bit fitter, a little bit fitter, a little bit fitter. If you could kind of hang in there and complete it all. And I kind of hung my hat on that. I really wanted to complete it all, and kind of I responded really well to that kind of bulk training load. So yeah, so I wasn't really like the best, like particularly strong on the erg. I was a little bit better over 5K, but was very weak. I was a very slow twitch guy. I was very weak in the gym. Probably the weakest ever, I think. I could bench press like 70 kilos or something. So I was just kind of like frustrating. Didn't really fit into a very neat box. But really, I think fundamentally, the on water stuff was what he kind of valued. He kind of seemed to value a kind of consistent pairs performer, basically. And I could row with all of the stroke siders on the team at the time, and they all rowed a little bit differently, but I was able to kind of row. I was able to fit with their way of doing it. I mean, they were all amazing, basically. So it didn't seem to me to be like, it seemed like a reasonable target, I guess.
Yeah. I know, talking to Hodgie, that he was a bit miffed he didn't get put in there, and I don't know if he
Yeah.
asked for a seat race at the last minute, or
Yeah, well,
because
he had a rational argument for sure.
did he?
I think we did a pairs matrix or something in maybe the February or the March.
Yeah.
I think Hodgie won it, and I think Langy won it on bow side.
Oh
I think
wow.
they kind of Langy edged me out. I think Hodgie edged Stan out maybe. Or maybe I got that wrong, but he was really up there. But then the two of them then, for whatever reason, maybe something flared up or something, but they had a dreadful final trials. And that then kind of ruled them out, basically. And I think also the ergo stuff, Stan was like just epic on sort of all fronts, really. But on the ergo particularly, he was, he had a big season that year. For his weight as well, he was kind of, physiologically, a bit of an outlier.
What was he pulling? Do you remember?
I think he did like a low 540s and a 15.0 something, 15.05 or whatever on his 5K. And that was a huge marker. And I think Hodgie was coming back from his glandular fever, so he was kind of on the back foot really from the start of the season.
Yeah.
But he never kind of, you would never know. He, as an athlete on the team, in terms of the like team culture, because I came from on a Cambridge group basically that was kind of struggling a bit to find its feet in the years that I was there, and the selection stuff would often result in just toxic, brutal division.
Yeah. Yeah.
And particularly if it was an experienced guy that would lose out. And it was really a difficult thing to manage, but that was not at all the case that year in 2016. The team we would try extremely hard to make the cruise, but then when all was said and done and the call was made, the focus was on, to winning the Olympics. And that was a huge cultural strength. It really was. And it was something that I personally didn't take for granted because I'd seen
Yeah.
the alternative, and it was really thanks to the experienced guys. I think both Hodgie and Pete, that Olympiad had to come from being, at the absolute peak to still winning the Olympics, but
Yeah.
having slightly younger guys kind of come through at their level, and the way they managed it was just faultless. It was just awesome, and the culture that drives is just so strong. When those leading guys carry themselves like that, it's kind of profound. It has these ripple effects.
Mm.
And it carries like immense kind of, well, from my side, just respect really.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I guess there was never any other order of seating for that four, other than the one it ended up in, with Stan, you, Mo in the tandem, and Gregors at bow.
yeah, we I think earlier in the season we had a go with Mo at stroke. I always felt that fours with because I Mo and myself used to row the Molesey Fours Head and
Yeah.
Nat Champs cruise together, and Mo would often stroke those crews, and I always thought that always to me that always felt the best, and I always felt when I was in the three seat it felt like horrible. It was all like tight and awful, and I'd never felt like I could properly relax. And I never felt like I was properly transferring rhythm between Stan and Mo, and I was kind of getting in the way. And it was the most for me. It was the most challenging seating order. And when we came together, it was quite disjointed. And I was like, "What is wrong? Like this should be amazing, and it's not. And something's not right." And I think we went out in pairs together. And I went out in a pair with Stan one day, and that was all wrong. And I was like, "What the hell's going on?" Like, I used to be able to row
Yeah.
with Stan, and then went out in a pair with Gregors the next day, and that was also all wrong. I was like, "Oh god, it's me." So I was basically, I think I was like trying to whip through the work a little bit too aggressively, and that was something that Will and myself used to do. It used to work quite well, but then the rest of those guys were kind of more flat through their power phase. They kind of get in and on and kind of hold power in a very kind of patient way.
Mm.
And I just it took me a couple of weeks to kind of figure that piece out a little bit. But once we were up and running, it was a crew that just got like better and better, and it was a crew that communicated so directly and so clearly,
Really?
without fear of kind of offending each other, or it was like a kind of like SEAL Team Six kind of unit. You could just say frankly what you thought, and people would just be like, "Yeah, all right, we'll do that then." The next day, and it was a cool crew to be a part of. It really was, and
Did
it was
Jurgen
fast too. It
did
was super
Jurgen
fast.
leave you alone and concentrate on the eight?
I think the eight had a more challenging season, and they had more disparate rowing styles to bring together, so it needed more input. So I think Jurgen did tend, and I think Jurgen at that time in his career was kind of more excited about winning an Olympic gold in the eight. I think for him that was like the blue ribbon event.
Mm.
Um, and for us, we didn't really want a coach, to be honest. We kind of just like going out there and rowing and chatting and figuring it out ourselves. We wanted to take responsibility for our own destiny, and
Yeah.
sometimes, depending on your mindset, I guess sometimes a coach kind of gets in the way of that. And to be fair to Jurgen, he really never did. He was a very he was very skilled at reading people and reading what different crews needed, and we didn't really need a lot of input after, but we did need something. I think in the first couple of weeks, that we had to kind of search a little bit, and I
Yeah.
certainly had to search a little bit. But I used to, yeah, I used to really enjoy it. I mean, that's really a really enjoyable piece of rowing is searching for that
Yeah.
change, that key that then unlocks efficiency. It feels like kind of shortcut, and I loved
Yeah.
finding those out. through my career.
You said you were fast. How fast?
We were good. We were just before we went to Rio. We, I think, Greg has used to like intermittently get like appalling illnesses from basically not sleeping. You know, he had 3 kids, and how he did it, I just don't know. I've got a 3-year-old now, and I'm, how you exercise, every day. I don't, I haven't figured that out, today. But how you do an Olympic rowing program, like, it's just unfathomable what he did. But anyway, he was out for the time trial, the team time trial before Rio, and Noddy jumped in,
Ah,
and we raced the quad just side by side, and I just used to love that. For me, that was just the best day. It was a little bit of a high pressure day, but I've just lived for trying to be better than the women's pair or the men's 8 or whoever it was, like the next crew on the
yeah.
list. And that day we had an absolute flyer. I think we did 5:38. We were like half a second off the world record. It was like flat Caversham.
Oh,
It was like a flat Caversham day, breath of tailwind, but quite hot in the summer.
yeah.
And after that, it was like, whew, like that was pretty fast. But we then went out to Rio. Gregor's jumped in, and he was still not quite right, and the water was all wobbly. The boat was different because it gets shipped out in a container, 2 months prior.
Mm.
And it was, a bit of humble pie. We're kind of like back to reality. And it's a little bit like, the feeling was a little bit like in 2015 when we put kind of 3 lengths into the Germans, and then, we're kind of up to here on the kind of World Championship final. It kind of felt a little bit, that Rio regatta felt a little bit like that. Heat wasn't quite right. We couldn't sit the boat in training. It felt like we couldn't even row in time. There were lots of things that were really niggled us, and the occasion nearly kind of got on top of us. But we were able to kind of get better, I think, as the regatta went on.
You never raced the Australians till the final, did you? And there was this whole thing about, what they were hoping to do to you guys.
Yeah, they were really a strong crew, and they had loads of confidence for sure. And we didn't really know, we had some racing through the season against them, so we did know that they were difficult to beat. And they had, got quite close. But in the final World Cup regatta, we'd felt like we'd beaten them fairly comfortably in Poznan. So we thought that if we had a good race, we should be okay. And the Australian team at that time they were super focused on the middle K. They used to be just super strong in the middle K, and they kind of neglected like the last 500. I used to think a little bit, and all of our training was subconsciously focused on the last 250 meters. Like,
Really?
yeah, like that was a very, we used to say, the middle K is obviously important, but you win it on the last stroke. That was a kind of a mantra. And all of our training pieces, even through the winter, we'd do like whatever it was, 2K at step rate, 22, 24, 26, 28. But we would always have, every week, we would always have a flat out 250 on the end of whatever training piece we were doing. That was it was an ingrained kind of pattern of racing and training. And so then when we came to the final and we were ahead of the Australians and, coming into 500 to go, to me it was like, well, this is game over. And I kind of knew that those guys, I actually rode with one of those Australian guys. I did a few months with Melbourne Uni when I was
Yeah.
18, and I rode with Will Lockwood. And
Oh,
at
right.
that time, he was just he was the best seat racer I ever came across. Like,
Really?
unrelenting, just unbeatable. Over 1,500 meters, he was insanely good. And if you jumped into a boat with him, he's one of those guys where you could just feel it was like 5% faster within a minute kind of thing.
Yeah.
He was just a high impact guy. But he used to, he always like anything over 5 minutes, I think was, he had to have a big lead to then kind of get over the line. I think the Australians had that kind of pattern. I think there was maybe a slight, not oversight, but it was a strength of ours that I guess fit a slight weakness of theirs. But they're an awesome crew for sure. They really were, and
Yeah.
the relief was strong.
Did you like you talked about what you were like in London, not sleeping between the semi and the final? Presumably, it wasn't like that in Rio.
Yeah, I spoke to Chris Shambrick about it after London, the kind of 2013 season, to try to. Chris Shambrick was the sports psychologist at the time on the British rowing team, and I wanted to get some kind of strategies and to practice because there are lots of pressure events that kind of mirror the feeling, but not. It's not quite as intense, but it kind of mirrors the feeling. World Championships, seat racing is a big one. Like seat racing days or erg testing days for me I used to feel a lot of pressure on those days, and so on those days I wanted something to try to find something that kind of worked, and specifically sleep. And Chris gave me a couple of techniques, and he said, try and flip it on its head, try and verbalize, very specifically to yourself, literally verbalize, what are you worried about, fundamentally. And when you do that, and when you try to kind of define what it is that's causing you a problem, it's kind of quite difficult to kind of pin it all down. And the act of doing that kind of diffuses it a little bit. And he was like, yeah, when you're sleeping, try and flip it on its head and say, well, how long can you stay awake in these moments? And I used to be a big one for napping during the day. And at Caversham, there was a kind of shipping container full of beds. And I tried to nap pretty much, but sometimes twice a day between sessions. I was not great overnight, and there would always be the sleep deficit. And on those big days, on those ergo testing days and seat racing days, I'd try to nap like 1 hour or something before the race while I was feeling nervous and feeling pressure to try that some of these methods. And in the end, it kind of worked, and I was able to like completely suppress, or not suppress, but completely control my kind of emotional response. So Rio was for me a real. On the day, I felt like in control of the pressure, and that for sure there was pressure, but to me, I was able to felt like I was able to manage it.
Yeah. How long before Rio did you know it was going to be your last games?
I think for me, it was a little bit conditional on the result.
Yeah.
I don't think I would have been able to let it go if I hadn't won, if that made sense. But and that sounds a bit, sort of wrong-headed. I was probably a little bit outcome-driven, and that's probably a little bit unhealthy. But I felt like as time went on, I felt the motivation to train sort of, I felt finding that motivation became more and more difficult. And it was never like really difficult. I always, kind of enjoyed it once it was done, but it kind of became a slightly heavier burden, and more injuries or kind of ghosts of injuries felt like they were creeping in. I felt like I was rowing around partial rib issues and back issues, and I felt like my heart would miss too many beats, increasingly. And I felt like I wasn't sure that I was going to really be able to do another 4 years and be at the same level, because I knew that to be at that level, I'd have to at least complete the same amount of training. And I was just lucky to be able to race with like the best people ever to row. You know, like some amazing rowers. So it was a combination of things, really. And I kind of also felt like I wanted a bit more control over the direction that we would take. And I sort of knew that on a rowing team, you know, really for it to be successful, the athletes have really got to submit. You've got to give away that control to the coach. You've got to trust your coach, and you've got to say, I'm going to be a work hardened gear in this gearbox. You know, you know, it's not my problem to kind of worry about what boat you put me in or whatever you put me in, I'm going to get it done, get the job done, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And as you get older, that feels like it's a bit more difficult. You feel like you want, actually, it'd be great if I could row a season with this guy and try the pair, or and that, and I knew that was not on the cards. That's not how the team has worked well. So yeah, I'm kind of waffling. It's not very clear.
No, that's.
And I guess in combination, I kind of had something else, I guess, that I wanted to try in the kind of working world and see how it went.
Did Jurgen ring you up and try and say, "Ah, George, let's go for Tokyo"?
I think I spoke to Jurgen fairly soon after Rio to say, you know, thanks very much for what you've done for me, really, and you know, I'm moving on. And it's not there was no, for me it wasn't a kind of negative thing. I seriously respected and appreciated Jurgen and David Tanner and that system. It suited me like so well. You know, I was quite a headstrong guy, and I didn't really like too much input. I really kind of felt like I needed to figure it all out for myself a little bit. And Jurgen seemed to give people the space a little bit to do that. But if he saw something happening that, you know, he really didn't like, he would kind of course correct. But he wasn't breathing down your neck every stroke and telling you this was wrong and that was wrong, even though it was. You kind of had it was kind of up to you to figure that out, if that makes sense. And I loved that. You know, I really appreciated that. So you know, for me, it was a seriously informative time, I guess, in my life. You know, the way the team was managed was really quite interesting, and the contrast, I think, between coming from some of those Cambridge teams, which were a little bit turbulent and dysfunctional in a way, to coming to the British setup was really really an interesting thing. So it was really more just a personal thing. I wanted to have a crack at moving on, and I knew that moving on was going to be a really big challenge whenever I did it, because you know, rowing defines you very much, and it's part of your identity. And starting again, you have to kind of, you know, be prepared to start again, you know, and do something in an extremely inexperienced way, and make lots of kind of novice mistakes, you know, for a long time before you get a little bit more confident. So
have I got this right? You've got 2 boat races on your Palmares.
I did 3. Well, I did 4 campaigns. I did 3 boat races.
3
did
boat
1
races.
Goldie
So
race.
you won in 2010. Is that your win? Did you win once or twice?
Just once. Yeah, we won in 2010, and we lost by.
That like why did you only win once? Like Olympic champion, Cambridge.
Yeah.
I know you beat the Facebook twins in, what was it, 2010.
Yeah, we were underdogs very much so that year, and we had this epic group, and we the previous year the guys had lost because they'd had this front-ended kind of race strategy, and we really reacted against that. And from the beginning of the year, we said, right, we are going to nail the section of the race from the end of the Chiswick Area to Barnesbridge, you know, the kind of empty bit that no one cares about. That's going to be our bit. And it so happened, it was kind of luck really, that we just started to come into the race, you know, at that time of the race, and everything kind of fell together. But it wasn't, I would say, it wasn't a particularly easy year. We were very, it was a very, it was a group of people that thought very differently about rowing. We had a wicked coach who also thought very differently about rowing, but that kind of, it was a team that, but because the
Tom,
coach was relatively new, he didn't have,
was that Chris Nielsen or Doug
Chris
Holland?
Nielsen was the coach, yeah.
Chris Nielsen, yeah.
And I guess because he hadn't had a lot of time as a boat race coach, he kind of hadn't built up. You know, at Cambridge we demanded to know why we were doing everything all the time.
Yeah.
Why, and we wanted kind of like first principles answers. You know, because those were the types of characters that we all were.
Yeah.
And sometimes in rowing, you know, the first principles answer is not kind of obvious, and some coaches are a little bit more intuitive, and they're, you know, for them, they're not expecting all this back chat. You know, they just want you to do what they say.
Yeah.
And yeah, Chris was a fantastically experienced guy, and the things that he said like resonated with me throughout the rest of my career. You know, he kind of really broke down my rowing stroke and changed it quite a lot. And at the time, I thought I really found it very challenging. But as time went on, everything he said was kind of exactly right. So there was no real. So the missing ingredient was kind of trust, that we just couldn't. We weren't able to kind of suspend our disbelief and have trust in what we were doing. And I guess on the day, all these things came right. I think Oxford had a couple of problems that year. Maybe Charlie Burkett had a bit of a bad back, and they had a turbulent time as well.
Yeah.
But anyway, the following year, you know, Stan came in on the Oxford side, and they built this unbeatable momentum kind of around Stan and Sean, and then Malcolm Howard came into it, and they had this program at the time that all of their guys really believed in and had faith in, and had this kind of juggernaut going. And we were kind of questioning everything that we were doing and saying, is this right? Is this really right? You know? And then Steve came in, and then kind of he had to then deal with that, and had to deal with all of us for the first couple of years, kind of questioning everything that he was doing. And I think that's not, you know, that doesn't work. It just didn't work basically for us. You know, a successful team has to choose to follow someone's lead, and if you can't make that choice, that is a problem, basically, particularly in a rowing team. So, but it was so interesting. You know, we had so many different guys come in with so many different views and attitudes, and for me, I just soaked it all up. All these North American perspectives, particularly, were just so different to the British perspectives that I was used to.
Yeah.
And they were so aggressive and enthusiastic, like every day, every stroke. And for me, that was awesome. I loved that. I love that view of the matter, and the way they spoke about the sport, so simple and candid, and I really loved that.
So I know you were close to the boat race before your son arrived. What is it about the Cambridge setup that has made it so successful in the last 6 or 7 years?
Yeah, I mean, the actual detailed answer to that question, I couldn't really give you, but I could say that when the last time I think I visited the guys in sort of around Christmas time last year, and the difference in the mood of the group is, compared to the mood of the group when I was there, is really profound. Like they were just buzzing about being there and engaging with everything that Rob is throwing at them. And I think there are a few things that they're doing well. I think their physiology has moved on quite a lot. So the physiological training there is effective. You know, Tom George, when he was there, you know, pulled a 5K world record, and that's a huge deal while you're studying.
Yeah.
Uh, and so they're moving on well through the season. I think they're technically kind of finding a few simple things that really do make a difference to boat speed. And I think it's difficult to find that when you have it, it's kind of simple and easy. But when you don't have it, it's so difficult to find. It feels so complicated, and there are so many routes that you could go down and try. But those guys, I think, under Rob's leadership, I think he pulls together two or three simple things that everyone can really grab onto and kind of self-evidently make work. They can all, whenever they ask the question why, you know, that there's always an answer that to them they probably think, yeah, okay, that makes sense, and I'm gonna, you know, I'll do it now, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But specifically, you know, the detail of what they're doing, I'm not exactly
Yeah.
certain.
I
There's
know
some
you
out,
watched. I know you watched all the Olympics, and you've already spoken about the British Eight as being one of the best eights of all time. I did just want to ask you: has anyone ever said your four is the best British four of all time?
no, no, I don't
I
think our
know.
four. I think our four was really strong, but I think I think the 1997 and 8 and 9 4 was good, was really another level for me. So yeah, I don't think we had a claim to that. I think we were difficult to beat. I'll give us that. But I think the 2011 British Four was also really difficult to beat. There was a day in 2011. I think Stan and I came down to Caversham. You know, we were both studying for our exams, and there was I think maybe the Hamburg World Cup had been cancelled
Oh
because the
yeah, it was.
cucumbers were all poisoned or something.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not sure. so, so there was a day when Stan and I got to jump in a four with Hodgie and Pete and race TJ and Gregors and Rick
Greg
and
is.
Langy. And you know, we got the four up and running with Hodgie and Pete, you know, and pretty well, and it felt like pretty powerful, and we were like, okay, you know, this could be pretty good. And Pete turns around, he's like, yeah, I think we're probably gonna win this, you know, like pretty like just instilling this epic confidence that I was like at the time, I was like, whoa, that's awesome. And we just jumped out, length and a half lead, whatever. It was a 1500 meter side by side. Kind of jumped out on them, absolutely hammering it, hammer and tong. And in that last 250, they they just got it done. They just edged us, and the time was just electric. I don't know what it was, like 4:10 or something. It was rapid, and and yeah, I think they were really difficult guys to beat. All of them, like guys like Gregors and TJ, they just they really did not lose easily.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so, and I think they were never really tested, you know, on the world stage. So none of their kind of times were that fast. But as a four, they were pretty good. But
Yeah.
and obviously, you know, all of Hodgie and Pete's four. I mean, I don't know. The Olympics, I think, probably in general, does move on every year, every 4 years. So it's likely actually that the American four that won this year is the best four ever. You know, that's just how it goes.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, they'd be pleased you said that. Anyone else strike you? I mean, what did you think of that pairs race?
Yeah, just heart goes out to our guys. It's just an epic race, you know. there was a lot of pressure on those guys. You know, everyone has their 2 cents, I guess. And to me, what they've done over the last couple of years has been pretty epic. I mean, to change sides and then,
Yeah.
you know, you wouldn't have predicted it, I would have said, from the 2021 eights result that those guys would be able to jump in the pair and lead the world. And yeah, it was a little bit heartbreaking. But again, the Croatian guys are a little bit like about some of those guys I previously mentioned. You know, they really do get it done when the time comes. But I think you know, I had a similar experience, but I was on the other side of that in 2016 in the four in a World Cup race when the Australian crew, you know, caught a crab 2 or 3 strokes before the line, and it just kills all momentum. And I think
That was at Lucerne, wasn't it?
at Lucerne, and had they not done that, you
Yeah.
know, they would have really taken the wind out of our sails, I think.
Yeah.
Really checked our momentum that season. But
Yeah.
yeah, but I mean, you know, it's difficult. It's difficult to kind of. It takes time, I think, to reflect on what all of these results mean and what the sport means and what it does for you as a person, really. And for me, as time goes on, you know, the more I'm able to kind of define, I guess, what it did for me, really. I mean, it's, you know, and I hope that those guys will be able to frame their time net positively, because
Yeah.
they're amazing.
When was the last time you rode?
I think it was, this is a little bit embarrassing, but I think it was the morning of Will's wedding, which was 2 years ago. We jumped out in a pair,
Yeah.
and yeah, I have just bought an ergo.
Oh, so the 547's still on.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, in 10 years' time. Yeah.
Oh, wicked. Yeah.
So yeah, I never thought I would, but I sort of need to. Yeah.
Yeah. That's cool. Well, George, you've been absolutely amazing. I think this has been one of the best Crosses Corners ever, really. Just and that last little bit, I'm so glad I asked you that. The battle of the Super Fours, the Super Fearers.
Well, I mean, other
didn't
nations fours is another point. You know, those Australian fours. It's difficult to stray away from some of those Drew Ginn fours.
Yeah.
I know we had some Australian guys that, in the Cambridge group, that would say that had Duncan Free and Sam, what's his name? Sam, he was a 7 seat, I think, in the Beijing Australian 8. Really tall guy.
Yeah.
Like fluid, rangy rower, unreal physiology. There was talk of a four between for 2012, I think, with him, Josh Dunkley Smith, and Drew Ginn. And you know, maybe, you know, that would have been that would have kind of redefined it. But I think probably those British fours in the kind of late 90s, you know, they were piping hot. They were good.
Yeah, that's wicked. So we're going to call an end to this live part of Crosses Corner on this Sunday. It's been amazing, George.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. It's just a pleasure to chat rowing. It really is. It's good to talk to you.
And thanks to your family and your wife for letting you spend this time on Crosses Corner. But
cheers,
we'll end the live part of this interview now. George Nash, everybody. Okay, I think you have to